Hello, my friends. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the autosomal DNA results of Sintashta Woman from southern Russia, from the steppes of, I think this is Chelyabinskaya Oblast. I'm not an expert on Russian geography, but I see there is Chelyabinsk right here, and so I guessed that this is Chelyabinskaya Oblast. So really, I am not an expert on Russian geography. I think this right here to the left of it would be Orenburskaya Oblast. I'm once again not sure, but I think this would be Orenburskaya Oblast. Then to the north would be Bashkortostan, and then Tatarstan. So this is kind of the steppe region of southern Ural mountains. It was inhabited in this time period in the Bronze Age by Sintashta Proto-Indo-Iranians. Later, it was inhabited by the Scythians and the Sarmatians, and later it was inhabited by the the people who came from the east, the Turkic peoples, right? Who completely replaced the Iranic peoples who lived here previously, and then it was the Uralic peoples, and then finally the Slavs came, and now the Slav Russian speakers live in this region. So there was definitely a lot of history to this Urals, southern Urals region. But anyway, this is a Iranic, Proto-Indo-Iranian speaker from the Sintashta culture, and we're going to explore her autosomal DNA in this video. So first of all, her mitochondrial haplogroup is J1b, very interesting mitochondrial lineage. I actually haven't encountered that very frequently. I think it comes from HV, so it has the same root as like U and the rest of European mitochondrial lineages. So I think it is also European, but I just haven't encountered that very frequently. I'm curious, where does J1b? Let's look it up. Mitochondrial DNA. Where does that come? Where is that most frequent? It seems to be, yeah, it seems to be most frequent in well, that's J1b1F. That's a different lineage, but yes, no, that seems to be most frequent in Europe. Okay, so but no, that's J1b. Yeah, that's A1b, but that's a subclade of J1b1A1. So that's a subclade of that lineage. So it looks like a European mitochondrial DNA. That's what I'm getting from this. Yeah, it's a European mitochondrial DNA. It is found in small frequency in Kyrgyzstan, it seems, but it's mostly European mitochondrial lineage. Pretty good, right? And she does not have a Y DNA because she's a female. And we are going to go ahead and look at her autosomal admixture. Her autosomal admixture is typical of Northern Europeans. As you can see, they resemble Swedish people, Norwegians, Icelandic people, Danish, Shetlandic people, Irish, Germans, Arcadians, Scots. But don't be fooled. Just because they have European autosomal admixture doesn't mean that Europeans descend from them. Europeans actually have no admixture from these Sintashta people. Sintashta culture does not contribute to European history whatsoever. Sintashta people moved east and south. So they contribute to Xiongnu, they contribute to Turkics. Turks have a lot of Sintashta admixture, various Turkic populations like Bashkirs, Tatars, they have a lot of Sintashta admixture. Indians in India, they have a lot of Sintashta admixture. Afghans in Afghanistan, Tajiks, various groups in eastern Tajikistan, Pamiri people, Uzbeks, Turkmen, Iranian, especially in east of Iran, they have a lot of Sintashta admixture. But Europeans in Europe who actually resemble Sintashta have no Sintashta admixture at all. It's very interesting. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. The Sintashta resemble Europeans, but Europeans themselves have no Sintashta admixture whatsoever. So the only way that as a European you might have any Sintashta admixture is if you have, say, a Tatar grandparent, or you have some kind of Turkic ancestry. That's the only way as a European you can have Sintashta admixture. But it's very interesting that despite contributing to all these exotic brown and non-European people, the Sintashta themselves were actually quite European in ancestry. Let's look at Nashakot results for this sample. And this sample is actually very different from the previous sample I analyzed, because this sample is very brown. And most Sintashta were actually quite brown in color. Actually, most Europeans until very recently were very dark. Uh, for Europeans to be blonde and blue-eyed, it's a very recent development. That's something that is very controversial to say. When I say this, I am going to people on my channel, they know that's what I think, but this is something that I would probably lose a lot of subscribers if I said this, if I didn't say this like every day. But it is a very controversial thing to say. In Europe, blue eyes and blonde hair is a very recent development. I'm talking about Iron Age and on. It is a very, very recent thing. Maybe even more recent than Iron Age, because most samples from Europe from the Bronze Age, even from the Iron Age, are much darker than Europeans today, and it's a very real phenomenon. Blonde hair and blue eyes is not something that is ancient. It is something that is completely new. So Sintashta being resembling Europeans in autosomal DNA does not mean they are blonde and blue eyed. They are very dark people. And for me to find a blue eyed and relatively light haired Sintashta for the previous video I made, I had to go through a couple samples to actually find a sample like that. I had to go through a couple samples to find that for you guys. So I had to really cherry pick to find you a blue-eyed Sintashta sample. So most Sintashta samples I will be posting have dark brown eyes like this sample, have black or dark brown hair like this sample, have light brown skin like this sample, have it looks like straight or wavy hair, but that's irrelevant. That's not about pigmentation. And Greek shaped nose, but that's also not about pigmentation. That's not so relevant, right? So in terms of the pigmentation of the sample is very dark. She has dark brown eyes. She's got dark brown hair, and she's got light brown skin. Who does this remind you of? This reminds you of people who descend from Sintashta. This reminds you of Pakistani, Afghans, and really Afghans and people who descend from Sintashta don't look very different from how Sintashta looked. They really don't. It's not like Sintashta were some blonde, blue-eyed, European-looking warriors who went and mixed with brown AASI and BMAC people and created these Afghan people who are now a mixture. No, 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 no. They looked the same as Afghans look today. They looked the same as Afghan people look today. As North Indians, they look the same as North Indians. They look the same as Afghans. It did not look any different from the way these populations look today. They're absolutely the same. And BMAC looked not much different as well. More or less the same, all of them. Yes, Sintashta, some of them did have blue eyes and lighter pigmentation, but it wasn't a big difference. It wasn't a big difference, really, between these populations. Not in the way that certain people online like to paint it. Paint the picture of blonde, blue-eyed European Sintashta. That's not the case. And for hair texture, it looks like she has straight or wavy hair. And for nose shape, it looks like she has Greek-shaped nose. All right. So she has two light color variants here. So with snipper 3, we might expect green eyes, actually. And no light color variants in this variation of BH2, no BH3, no BH1. Actually, no. Probably brown eyes with snipper 3. Because no BH1 and 2 and 3. But still, this is very interesting. Well, probably brown eyes with snipper 3 still. We might want to check. And she does actually have one variant for ginger hair in MC1R. But we do want to check what she scores with snipper 3 for eye color. I think it might be brown. But it might also be green or hazel. Let's check. It probably is brown, though. Yeah, it's brown. All right. Let's look at the phenotype oracle. So for the phenotype oracle, looks like the closest phenotype to her is this, which is I'd say a Cro-Magnon or a sort of a stranded phenotype, very dark colored stranded phenotype. As you can see, it's got very dark color of eyes, dark color hair, sort of a darkish skin tone as well. Followed by that is a Middle Eastern phenotype, which is very fitting. I think that's a more fitting phenotype for what she might look like. Followed by that is a Turanid, Pamirid phenotype, which is also, I think, very, very fitting for what she might look like. And then there's the phenotype oracle. So as you can see, with this phenotype oracle, she was quite dark. She looked like a mixture of perhaps whatever this is, plus plus 50% this, or whatever this is plus 50% Alpinid, or let's call this Berberid. 50% Berberid plus 50% Volgid, 50% Middle Eastern plus 50% Stranded, 50% Berberid plus 50% French. So quite dark. Definitely doesn't look Swedish or Norwegian. And actually, most of these Sintashta people look nothing like modern Swedes or Norwegians. Even the ancestors of Swedes of Norwegians in the Bronze Age look nothing like Swedes and Norwegians today. So, yeah, Sintashta, being a Bronze Age population, are very dark people. Let's look at the biomarkers results for this sample and see what she scores for that. So it looks like she has a above average level of vitamin D. Let's look that up actually in the file. Yes, so she has, based on these three variations, she's got three genotypes and they both lead to higher levels of vitamin D. So that makes sense. I like to look that up in the file every time I see that. She has above average levels of LDL cholesterol, but it's kind of close to the average, so it's not that big of a deal. And slightly below average level of HDL cholesterol, also very close to the average, so it's also not a big deal. But technically, it is kind of a bad result. It is kind of unhealthy. You want to have below average LDL and above average HDL. She's got above average level of glucose, kind of bad as well. She's got above average hemoglobin, kind of bad as well. She's got below average blood pressure. She's got below average level of iron in the blood. She's got below average level of sex hormone binding globulin. She's got below average level of red blood cell count in blood. Above average number of base pairs for telomere length. Good to see. And she's got slightly above average for height. Slightly above average height for her gender. Okay, pretty good. Pretty interesting stuff. But it's pretty much close to the average. 1/10 of a millimeter above the average is pretty much average for height. All right. Let's look at the polygenic risk scores, and we're going to ignore everything that's close to 1. We are only going to look at stuff that's far from 1. So it looks like she has high score for kidney stones. Looks like she has below average odds for hemoglobin E disease, below average odds for migraine, very low score for gout. That's really good to see. Low score for thyroid cancer, low score for eczema, high score for primary congenital glaucoma, high score for polycystic ovary syndrome. That's kind of bad. Okay, so she's a female and she's got sort of above average score for polycystic ovary syndrome. It's not that big of a deal, like 1.2 times the average. It's not that horrible, but it is a little bit higher than average. She's got below average also cataracts. She's got very low score for age-related macular degeneration. Really good to see. She's got high score for rheumatoid arthritis. I noticed that with the scores for AMD and rheumatoid arthritis, people either score really, really high or really, really low for them. And I think I need to fix that. People score either like 0.4 or like 4 point something. And it's either way too high or way too low. And of course, I understand why that happens. But I think that needs to be fixed a little bit. She's got low score for Tourette's. She's got slightly above average score for vitiligo. She's got high score for myopia. She's got a below average score for stroke. She's got a high score for male pattern hair loss, so she's predisposed to male pattern hair loss. Not surprising whatsoever because she's a European, or at least of European ancestry, and people of European ancestry tend to be more predisposed to male pattern hair loss. She's got below averages for atrial fibrillation. Pretty good stuff. For cardiovascular panel, she's got below average also cardiovascular issues, which is really good to see. She's got average odds for ADHD. She's got average odds for depression. She's got average odds for bipolar type 1, average odds for schizophrenia, and she's got average odds for type 2 diabetes and average odds for type 1 diabetes, and she's got average odds for Alzheimer's, and she's got below average odds for multiple sclerosis. Really good to see. So I don't see anything that's too concerning in this result besides the score for rheumatoid arthritis. We can look that up in the file, but I sort of got out of the habit of doing that because there's so much here that you can find. There's these two genotypes that both lead to a significantly increased risk of rheumatoid arthritis, and they both affect the score quite greatly. The HLA panel does not affect the score for rheumatoid arthritis, but I think it should. I feel like it should. Um, Maybe it will in the future. Okay, let's go over this. Cancers panel, 1 risk factor for breast cancer out of 8, very low, pretty good stuff. Um, she's got nothing for prostate cancer, really good to see, so nothing was found here. 9 risk variants for testicular cancer out of 16, and looks like she's got two risk variants in all the relevant variations of KITO G, which is typical for Europeans. Once again, I talk about that in every video. Yeah, I think you might have caught on to it that when I cover European samples, they all have pretty much the same results here for KITO G. They all have the same genotype, where they have two risk variants in all the important variations of KITO G for testicular cancer, and that is because it's very typical for Europeans to have this genotype here. Well, it is what it is. Europeans have a predisposition to testicular cancer that other ethnicities do not have, and that doesn't mean that every European has testicular cancer. It just means that every European has this slight predisposition, and it's not that big of a deal. Not every European gets testicular cancer at some point in their life. Only some of us do. She's got no risk variance for celiac disease, which is really good to see. No risk variance for GSS, really good to see. 1 risk variance for Crohn's, all right. But it's not marked as important, so it's not that big of a deal. No risk variance for Raffenstein's, no risk variance for Parkinson's. 1 risk variance for Gilbert syndrome out of 4, but it's not marked as important. No risk variance for basal cell. Actually, I'm gonna scroll through all of this. 7 for allergies out of 20 total, which is pretty typical. Actually, it's exactly typical, exactly 1 out of 3, so it's really typical. And no risk variance for anything else. Or yes, 1 common risk variance for myosclerosis, but it's not uncommon, so that's very typical as well. And we don't see any missed calls. We don't see anything that is uncommon. So from this, we already understand that it's going to be a very high quality file. By high quality, I don't mean that it's got a lot of information in it. By high quality, I mean that it doesn't have that many missed calls. Because some files have a lot of information, but they also have a lot of missed calls. And there's a couple of different metrics that I use to apply to these files now. I've been doing this for a while, and I noticed that there's a couple of patterns that you can observe in the files. Some files have a lot of information, which I really love. I love it when the file has a lot of information, but also I like it when the file is pure, when the file has information you can trust, when it doesn't have miscalls, when it doesn't have genotyping errors. And this seems to be the case here because I'm not seeing any miscalls here. I'm seeing a lot of no risk variants found in the files for all these rare conditions, and that's very good. But then again, there's a lot of these 0 out of zeros, right? 0 out of 0, 0 out of 4, 0 out of 0, 0 out of 0. So when you think about it more in depth, maybe it's just a really poor quality file. Maybe that's what stands behind this. Yeah, it's a lot of 0 out of zeros. Yeah, I think I spoke too soon when I said it was when I said this file lacked genotyping errors. Maybe I spoke too soon. Let's close this. Okay, now let's go through the monogenic traits and find out what's up in this file. All right, so for warrior versus warrior phenotype, this individual definitely has a predisposition to warrior phenotype, which means slower dopamine reuptake and higher dopamine levels, lower stress resiliency. So based on the genotypes in COMT, MAOA, and MAOB, she's got a predisposition to being a warrior. Actually, a very strong predisposition. This is a very strong predisposition, 62.9% versus 3.7% for warrior. So she's definitely much more of a warrior. We can go over these results. She's got a TT genotype in this version of MAOA and A genotype in this version of COMT. These are both warrior genotypes. Also, this genotype is a warrior genotype in COMT. There's a couple of other genotypes she has here that are also warrior genotypes. I think all of these are warrior genotypes actually, because that's the only way you can get a score like this. But essentially, that's a very European phenotype to have. Warrior phenotype. There is a couple of implications to the warriors or warrior phenotype. Warriors are more commonly found in such professions as boxing or military. Warriors are typically more commonly found in such professions as scientific field or teaching or the arts. There's been studies done into MMA fighting, and they found that people with the warrior genotypes were overrepresented among the MMA fighters. That's why it's called the warrior phenotype. And essentially, the reason it is that people with the warrior phenotype have quicker dopamine reuptake. They have higher activity of the enzymes that break down dopamine, which is the COMT enzyme, but also the MAA and MAOB enzyme. And because they have more activity of these enzymes, they have quicker dopamine reuptake, lower dopamine levels, and higher ability to tolerate stress because they have lower dopamine levels. And when they encounter a stressful condition, stressful situation, their dopamine levels reach the perfect point, perfect peak for functioning. Because in stressful condition, your body produces more dopamine, and that's what makes them able to tolerate these stressful conditions better. Warriors, on the other hand, they have slower dopamine reuptake because they have less activity of these COMT, MAOA, MAOB enzymes, and higher dopamine levels at all times, which means they are better at tolerating and navigating low stressful conditions when there is not much stress in the environment, and natural dopamine production is lower. They are better at adapting to these types of conditions. And I have my own little theories about that, what the implications of that are. For example, my own little theories involve ADHD and schizophrenia. For example, in my own theory, the warrior phenotype would be implicated in such conditions as schizophrenia and bipolar, whereas the warrior phenotype would be implicated in ADHD. But I don't really want to push it forward like that, and um, it's just a theory. I don't really have the scientific backing for it because there is some studies that back it, and you can find and you can if you do the research, you can find some studies that back it. But also, if you do research, you will find studies that go entirely 360 against it, 180 degrees against what I just said, and there is just so much contradiction about warrior versus warrior that I have a really hard time um, making statements like that because there's just so much contradiction in the scientific world about this particular dichotomy. For dopamine D2 receptor sites, looks like she has a predisposition to intermediate number of dopamine D2 receptor sites. So, um, intermediate predisposition to such conditions as bipolar and schizophrenia. There is absolutely no contradiction. There is no discussion in the scientific community about this whatsoever. It's been done and settled. Like this is studied. This has been confirmed back in like 25 or something, 2005, 2007. This is something that's been studied from the very beginning and confirmed with scientific inquiries back in a couple of decades ago. So this is not something that's really a matter of discussion. But the warrior versus warrior is definitely a matter of discussion, and I theorize it's going to be a matter of discussion for a couple more decades. For 5-HT and serotonin, she's got a predisposition to lower or intermediate levels of 5-HT and serotonin, so predisposition to higher odds of such conditions as depression and anxiety. And for autism, she's got a predisposition to intermediate or higher odds of autism, so she's got a predisposition to, be a little bit autistic. For lactose persistence, looks like she has a predisposition to intermediate or higher odds of lactose intolerance, so she's more likely to be lactose intolerant than not. That is because she does not carry the European variant for lactose persistence in MCM6. Very, very interesting. And for OXTR, the empathy gene, it looks like she does not have. She has a predisposition to lower or average level of empathy based on these 3 genotypes in OXTR. All right. For Alzheimer's, looks like she does not carry the risk variant for Alzheimer's in APOE, which is really good to see. For multiple sclerosis, no risk variant for multiple sclerosis in the HLA gene, really good to see. Cardiovascular gene panel, looks like she has a predisposition to lower or intermediate odds of cardiovascular issues, really good to see. Okay, for vitiligo panel, 1 risk variant for vitiligo in the HLA gene, which is unfortunate, but 1 out of 4 risk variants is really good to see. So keep in mind that there is 2 HLA variations here on this vitiligo panel, and she's only got 1 risk variant. Now that's 1 out of 4 alleles that she's got. 1 risk allele out of 4 total. That's good. That's good in its totality. She's got no micropenis. She's got increased cranial size and 2% higher IQ. She's got better performing muscles like a sprinter rather than endurance athlete. And she's got European facial traits, no European EDAR, no East Asian EDAR. All right. She's got much higher risk of heart failure due to beta blocker medications. Really interesting. And no risk variance for pain hypersensitivity in SCN9A. No familiar Mediterranean fever mutations. All right. She does have a genotype in MTHFR that leads to possibly impaired folate metabolism, which is very interesting. So this also affects the homocysteine panel. Homocysteine, yes, homocysteine panel. This affects, and I don't remember what she scored on cardiovascular polygenic risk score page, but um, actually, I think she scored good for the cardiovascular issues. Yes, so that makes sense. Yes, I think she scored average for the cardiovascular issues page. Hold on, let's scroll back to it. Yeah, she scored slightly below average for the odds of cardiovascular issues. So we can actually guess what she scores for the homocysteine panel from this, right? She scores very good on the cardiovascular issues panel. So from this, we can assume that she scores average on the homocysteine panel. Yes, and she does indeed score average on the homocysteine panel. Actually, slightly below average, slightly worse than average. So she scores the same for elevated homocysteine as she does for intermediate homocysteine levels. Yeah, a little bit worse than average for homocysteine panel. So that makes sense, and that's because she's got this genotype in MTHFR. This really spoils the homocysteine panel for her. For rare diseases and traits panel, let's see. She's got, what does she have? Um, she's got all these predispositions to rheumatoid arthritis. She's got a predisposition to ankylosing spondylitis, but I've seen that before. I've seen so many samples with this. It's not a surprise to me whatsoever. Not a carrier for Sanfilippo syndrome risk, which is really good to see. Higher odds of esophilic esophagitis. That's pretty common. And common but 10 times higher risk of glaucoma in most but not all populations. That's pretty interesting. But I don't see any rare diseases here. Okay. Canavan syndrome, no risk variants here. For HIV and AIDS panel, she's got one protective variant and in this variation of HLA-C, which is really good. So she's got some protection from HIV, but for HLA gene panel, it is looking really good. Looks like she has predisposition to lower odds of autoimmune disease. I think with this information here, predisposition to lower odds of autoimmune disease, we don't even really need to look at the HLA genotypes. We already know what it's going to be. So we're just going to skip that over. And for the homocysteine panel, looks like no risk variants for homocystinuria. Really good to see. So, but there's only 2 variants found on the file, so it's not a very high quality file, unfortunately. Maybe if there was more variants in the file present, we could get more information. But I think maybe it's good that this file doesn't have that much information, because I haven't seen any miscalls. I have not seen any false information so far, which is really good. That's also a signature of high quality. I'd rather see files that are a little bit lower in quality but don't have any miscalls than files that have a lot of quality and a lot of information but have a lot of miscalls. Although, it's certainly for content and for making good content, making entertaining videos, maybe more content, more information would be better. But then again, my videos are already long enough as they are. Alright, for muscular dystrophy myopathies, no risk variants here. ADL, no risk variants for ADL. Color blindness panel, one risk variant in OPN1SW, very interesting. So she has one risk variant for color blindness in OPN1SW. The other genes, nothing was found here. For obesity, she has a predisposition to lower odds of obesity. Really good to see. So based on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 SNPs, she's got a predisposition to lower odds of obesity. For syncope panel, based on 1 or 2 SNPs, she's got a predisposition to higher than average odds for syncope. So syncope is when you lose consciousness, when you faint due to a loss of blood flow to your brain. And that seems to be the case for her. She's got some predisposition to that. And looks like she has a lower predisposition to anger and 2 copies of the quote-unquote farmer CLTCL1 gene variant, which leads to a selective advantage in processing carbohydrate-rich diets, presumably including those with lots of sugar. Very interesting. Sintashta people, did they practice farming? Did they practice agriculture? I don't think so. They were more nomadic. They were more horses and cattle herding, so they weren't really farmers. But she does have 2 copies of the farmer CLT-CL1 gene variant, which is very interesting. It would be These farmer gene variants would be advantageous for their globular amphora and tripilia ancestors, but I'm not sure what the advantage of these farmer variants for Sintashta would be. But that's very interesting. That's also very interesting. And now finally for the blood group results, their blood type is type O at 73.9% odds, and type A at 25.8% odds. So most likely type O is the blood type for this sample. Definitely a very interesting sample. Let me zoom in so you can see the blood type. Type O is the most likely blood type for this individual. So that's the DNA results of Sintashta I0943. There's going to be more Sintashta videos in the future. I'm going to cover every high quality Sintashta sample I can find, and you will see all of them on my channel in upcoming days. I will cover every sample that there is. You will see all of them. Now, thanks for watching my video until the very end. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Make sure you check out the description. In the description will be the links to buy this sample. There will be the links to buy my trade predictor, which is the tool I use to generate these reports. There will be the link to buy a report with my trade predictor. So there's going to be a bunch of links, and there's going to be a bunch of really interesting information in the description. Make sure you check it out. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.